They are hosting Han Chinese men living inside of their houses, supervising and then monitoring their daily lives. Your Muslim sisters, your Muslim Uyghur sisters are being subject to sexual abuse every single night. They have husbands, they have brothers, but they are being subject to such a sexual abuse every single night in their own home.
Sister Rushan, Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum salam.
So I wanted to ask you first that you were a translator for the Uyghurs in Guantanamo. And I remember one of the Uyghurs who held with us, he said to me that he was thankful and praised Allah that he wasn't handed over by the Pakistanis or the Afghanis to the Chinese. What was your experience of the Uyghurs when they were in Guantanamo in regard to this?
I went to Guantanamo in April 2002 when they first brought those Uyghur brothers there. And when I translated for the initial interrogators by the US, the Uyghurs were very happy to be in the custody of the United States. And in the initial first interviews, and they even said the truth about their real names and their families, and whatever the question the interrogators were asking, the Uyghur brothers were telling everything, as well as saying, when we were first in the custody, when we first detained in Pakistan and brought to Afghanistan, they said they were so worried to send back to China, so they didn't even say that they were Uyghurs. Each of them gave different names, and they said they are Uzbeks from Afghanistan, because they said if they tell the Afghani or Pakistani authorities, or when they were there, and initially when they were detained, if they say that they are Uyghurs, they knew those countries would send them back to China, because it has happened before. And myself, actually, when I was a reporter at Radio Free Asia, I have reported some of those deportations. So I can relate to their concern. But to answer your question, yes, they were very happy to be in the US custody in Guantanamo.
That's very important for the context of the war on terrorism, because we've seen over the past 20 years that there has been a war on terrorism. But what we've not really seen is the people's war on terrorism, which is what China calls its targeting of the Uyghurs. I wanted to ask you that one thing we experienced in US custody in the beginning, the early days, as part of the dehumanization process, was the use of buckets to use for toilets, as a toilet for large groups of people. I've heard in the testimony this morning at the Uyghur Tribunal in London that these methods of putting people in communal cells and forcing them to use a bucket to go to the toilet together is also being used against the Uyghurs in East Turkestan. Can you explain to me how widely spread that is and why that's happening?
Exactly for the reason what you just stated, dehumanizing the people, putting them in the communal areas, and treating them not like human beings supposed to be treated. What you have not experienced is actually you didn't have cameras right above of that bucket that you're using, and the policemen are sitting outside and watching whatever you are doing there. That's what's happening to Uyghur people. With those concentration camps, the Chinese regime is combining together with ultra-nationalistic racism and the hatred they had against Islam, as well as combining with high-tech surveillance, so monitoring everybody. The Uyghurs are not just a subject to the racism and the ultra-nationalism from the Chinese regime and being called as terrorists and this and that, but they're also living like what you have read in the 1984, George Orwell's 1984, complete surveillance monitoring. So imagine that, whatever you have experienced, top of that, the monitoring with cameras everywhere, and every corner of the room is being monitored, whatever you do. 24/7.
I've also learnt that political prisoners, those accused of separatism, are dressed in orange, just like we were in Guantanamo. What's the significance of the use of orange, and what does separatism actually mean to the Chinese government?
Anything that separated us from Han Chinese people, or anything separated Uyghurs with our faith as Islam and our ethnicity as Uyghurs, that we are being called as terrorists or separatists or extremists. Salam alaikum, the most peaceful way of Muslims greeting each other, that's being outlawed. If you use the word of salam alaikum or alaikum salam, you are being sent to those concentration camps. If you refrain yourself from drinking alcohol or eating pork, or even if you don't drink or eat during Ramadan, you are being sent to the concentration camps. Basically, all aspects of Islam, all the aspects of Islam is being outlawed by this Chinese regime. And anybody who is practicing the simple, normal parts of Islam is being called separatists and the extremists. So wearing an orange suit means that you have probably your ethnic identity that you are carrying with you when you are speaking Uyghur, or you call yourself Uyghur, or you are proud of yourself being Uyghur, or you have any single aspect of Islam that you have practiced. People even attending Islamic ceremonies for weddings, nikahs, being sent to prisons and being sentenced for 15, 20 years. Not anything about, joining Islamic religious studies, even just attending Islamic ceremony. The saddest part is the Uyghur girls are forced to marry Han Chinese men. And if she refused to marry this guy because she doesn't want to get married, or she's not ready to get married, or maybe she wants to marry to somebody else, she's being called as separatist or extremist because she didn't want to marry non-Muslim Han Chinese.
So she'll be imprisoned and put into a re-education?
Yes, because she refused
dressed
to.
in orange.
Yes, she will be wearing orange. And you know why? Because she will be abused by other criminal prisoners, because she's being identified as political prisoner there. And any brothers, as I mentioned earlier, even just simple as having a beard, mustache, or going to mosque and praying, they will be wearing orange as a political prisoners. And any criminals being held there because they did something, actually, they broke the law, and they will be abusing and torturing those political prisoners there.
So now, literally, we're just approaching the 20-year anniversary since the 9/11 attacks and the beginning of the war on terrorism. That essentially, in the eyes of many, is coming to a close. Mm-hmm. But what is it that you see is happening now?
Well, China has been waging people's war on terror. They manipulated the situation right after the 9/11 in the United States. The Uyghurs overnight became terrorists. Although just that summer, just 1 month before that, the Chinese government was producing propaganda videos saying that come to Xinjiang, invest in Xinjiang, this peaceful, beautiful place, your investments are safe with beautiful Uyghur culture. 1 month later, when 9/11 happened, all the Uyghurs became the separatists and the terrorists and extremists. So whatever happened in the war on terror, that was war against the individuals. But what Chinese government is doing is war against faith, war against Islam. My own sister a retired medical doctor, Rushan Abbas. Today we are marking the 3rd year anniversary that on September 10, her daughter spoke to her last. Next day, on September 11th, she was abducted by the Chinese regime. Just 6 days after I spoke publicly denouncing China's concentration camps and China's war on Islam, and my own sister, a very law-abiding, simple, ordinary person living in Urumqi, was abducted. 3 years now, we have no information on her whereabouts. The Chinese regime is clearly waging war on Islam, using People's War on Terror, and using the Islamophobia, but they are the biggest, actually, the Chinese regime is state-sponsored terrorist state that actually terrorizing the innocent Uyghur Muslims. Yet, the world is not seeing for what it is because of China's disinformation and the false narratives and the claiming that those Uyghurs in the concentration camps are receiving re-education or vocational trainings while they are imprisoning and sentencing harshly all the religious scholars, imams, professors, university presidents, and the doctors, even successful business people. What kind of vocational training do they need? They are brainwashing these people while the Uyghur children, more than 1 million Uyghur children, are taken to state-run orphanages where they are being raised as atheists, Chinese, and denouncing their ethnic identity, denouncing their religion. The Uyghur women left at home, they are hosting Han Chinese men living inside of their houses, supervising and then monitoring their daily lives. Your Muslim sisters, your Muslim Uyghur sisters are being subject to sexual abuse every single night. They have husbands, they have brothers, but they are being subject to such a sexual abuse every single night in their own home. The Chinese regime is doing in our homeland is unprecedented in anywhere in the world, uncomparable to any government's Islamophobia or war on terror. They are trying to eradicate Islam. They are trying to establish communist atheist ideology on Muslim people, Muslim Uyghurs. On their own media, state media is announcing openly to the world that they are rewriting Holy Quran to make it compatible with Chinese atheist ideology. And very sadly, many of the Muslim majority countries and the Muslim Ummah are quiet. And that's what makes me extremely sad.